Well, welcome to the meeting of the Equity Advisory Committee for today, January 19th, 2021, the last day of the Dark Ages. I'll leave it at that. I need to read this disclaimer first. I want to acknowledge that COVID-19 is causing us to alter our usual procedures, and we have invited guests of the region to participate in this meeting virtually. As we know, Governor Walz has declared a peacetime emergency in response to COVID-19, and the Met Council has determined it is not practical or prudent to conduct an in-person committee meeting for reasons stated in the Governor's emergency executive order. Accordingly, Met Council members will participate in this meeting by phone or other electronic means, and this Equity Advisory Committee meeting will be conducted under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021. Before we call this meeting to order, a few quick reminders and guidelines about the WebEx event and the virtual meeting process. We will ask you to remain muted unless speaking. If you're on the phone and the computer, only unmute one device when speaking, and that's just to avoid the feedback noise. Please announce your name before speaking. All votes are conducted by roll call. Communicate with each other only through speaking, and only use the chat function to address technical difficulties, such as you cannot hear or be heard, or that you have a question. Use the raise hand feature if you wish to speak. If that doesn't work, type in the chat, "I have a question." For your information, this meeting is being recorded and will be made available online. Irina will be monitoring the chat, and reach out to her if you're having technical issues. She will put her cell phone number in the chat. Okay, so at this time I call the meeting to order, and I think we need to call a roll call just to make sure that we have quorum.
We do.
Okay.
So I will be calling this roll call verbally. So I'll be calling it by last name, then first name this first time, and then I will be calling all the subsequent roll calls normally. So when you hear your name called, please say yes or no if you were, well, clearly if you're not here, please say yes if you were here. Block, Lenise. Bolin, Andres. I know you're here if you can't respond. Cole, Desrelin. Goldstein, Moses, Leah.
Yes.
Gonzalez, Francisco.
Here.
Jenkins, Nicholas.
Here.
Lee, Chai.
Here.
Lucene, Michael. McDonald, Edward.
Yes.
Miller, Julia. Wei, T.
Yes.
Paul, Richard. Rudolph, Sarah.
Here.
Sheikh Mohammed.
Here.
Tatate Munene, Nalima. Sterner, Philip. Irvina Davis, Anita.
Here.
All right.
Excellent. Thank you, Irina. So moving down the agenda for today, the first order of business is approval of the January agenda. And I believe everybody had a copy of the agenda email to you with the announcement for tonight's meeting. So may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Mr. Chair, Edward McDonald, motion to approve the agenda.
Thanks, Edward. Is there a second?
Kiwi second.
Excellent, thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the agenda? Seeing no discussion, then all in favor of adopting the agenda, I think Irina needs to call a roll call, a yea or nay on approval.
I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lenise Block, Andreas Boland, Desrelyn Cole, Leah Goldstein Moses,
Approved.
Francisco Gonzalez,
Yes, approve.
Nicholas Jenkins,
Aye.
Chai Lee,
Aye.
Michael Luceni, Edward McDonald,
Yes.
Julia Miller, T. Way,
Approve.
Richard Paul, Sarah Rudolph,
Approve.
Mohammed Sheikh,
Aye.
Nalima Sitate Munene,
Aye.
Philip Sterner, Anita Irvina Davis.
Aye.
Thank you.
Excellent, motion carries. Just moving on, and we're doing great time-wise, so appreciate that. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the December 15, 2020 meeting. And may I have a motion to approve the minutes, the December 2020 meeting?
Mohammed Sheikh, I move to approve the motion.
Thanks, Mohammed. Is there a second?
This is Anita Urbina Davis. I second.
Excellent, thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. Irina, can you call the roll call again?
Indeed, Mr. Chair. Lenise Block, Andreas Boland, Desrelyn Cole, Leah Goldstein Moses,
Approve.
Francisco Gonzalez,
Yes.
Nicholas Jenkins,
Aye.
Chai Lee,
Aye.
Michael Luceni, Edward McDonald,
Yes.
Julia Miller, T. Way,
Approve.
Richard Paul, Sarah Rudolph, Mohammed Sheikh,
Aye.
Nalima Sitate Munene,
Aye.
Philip Sterner, Anita Irvina Davis.
Aye.
Excellent
Serena,
motion.
I'm sorry,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Co-Chair. This is Sarah Rudolph. I was stuck on my mute button, but I approve as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. So motion carries. Thank you again for moving this forward. Again, following the agenda for tonight, if this is the time for the public invitation, so any members of the public are invited to bring forth issues of discussion items, bring forth issues or discussion items before the Equity Advisory Committee. I don't know if we have any members of the public waiting to communicate. Is there anybody from in the waiting room or signing up that is not a member?
I don't believe we have any tonight, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. Well, if somebody comes up, we can always allow for time since we're going very well on the agenda today, time-wise. So we can always have folks chime in at a later part. That's okay. So I think that at this time we will continue with the next item, which is the EAC work plan. So we have been discussing finalizing the 2021 work plan. Uh, Also, keeping in mind that we have scheduled, or we were thinking of having a presentation before the council, I believe next month. So we're just going to go over some of the documents that we email you about the work plan and the, let me just go there, and the priority areas that we were discussing. Um, Thank you, Arena. So this is the priority areas that we have been discussing. I think at least the last couple of minutes, meetings, excuse me. And these are uh, based on initially on what we submitted for last year, our priority areas. Then we had that discussion, I believe, at the last meeting about changing some of the priority areas, adding one, um, eliminating another one, and then updating the language on most, if not all, the other priority areas. So um, today we were having some updates to this, and we incorporated some of the uh, recommendations from the members that were made at the last meeting. And this is the most current draft of our priority areas. And this is again the guiding document that we will follow during next year. Um, I don't think that we need to go over every single of the items again, since I remember that last time we did so and we discussed this in some detail. I would just like to again bring to your attention that we had made some changes that were emailed to all of you earlier today with the additions and corrections, and then we just open this for your review and additional comments that you might have. Nalima, anything else that you would like to add at this point? I don't know if she's muted.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No, I have nothing more to add, Francesca.
Okay. Um, do we need to have a vote on this tonight? Is that what we're hoping to do? Nalima, you're muted.
Sorry. I was trying the little trick that Katie taught us, so I don't have to keep on meeting myself. But well, I was saying, well, hopefully we can get to a final document that the committee feels comfortable on approving on tonight. That's the goal.
Mr. Chair, I like to move that we approve this so that we can at least get to the discussion of the motion process. So I like to move approval.
Okay. Any other comments, suggestions regarding the priority areas before we move for a vote?
Mr. Chair, I just have a couple questions for my own knowledge and just trying to understand some of the terminology in here. I'm willing to live with that, but I just need clarification for myself. And I am looking under the Operations Committee recommendations, and Section 2 if someone can explain to me how do you define undercapitalized and underserved? And is that different than underutilized?
That's an excellent question. To be honest with you, I don't recall exactly where the language came. I think that those terms of undercapitalized or underserved, I've heard being part of the discussions that we have had on the DBE and MCOP programs, and Cerinthia can chime in if those terms have very technical specific terms meanings, excuse me, the way we're using them, or if they are interchangeable with any other terms. I think I I don't think that I'm I'm clear that there's a lot of difference, but if I'm mistaken, I'll be more than happy to we'll be more than happy to look into that and making sure that we use the correct terminology as to what we want to accomplish.
Mr. Chair, as I read the technical definition by the Department of Labor, the only term that I see them use to describe businesses that I'm aware of, there may be something else, is underutilized. If you're in further and equal opportunity, if there isn't a entity that is from a community and the reason for that entity not being able from that community to participate in contracting under further and equal opportunities, the contracting entity has the responsibility to eliminate that barrier. If it's undercapitalization, then they need to take steps to the fullest extent possible to make sure that access to capital that would eliminate that barrier is in place. That's under further and equal opportunity. And maybe this is just educational, to some. Underrepresented, I have not seen anything in any disparity studies conducted by the Met Council or the state of Minnesota that indicate there are not enough willing, able, and available MBEs to sufficiently meet any targeted utilization benchmarks that they would establish. So I'm just kind of confused by those two terms. They sound good, and sometimes we can use terms like marginalized and underutilized or undercapitalized, and they kind of have this way of pointing toward people of color or some descriptive construct that doesn't necessarily technically align with, what the law says. So anyway, I just want to raise that. I don't know if we need to change it, but it just seems like in some ways they either conflict with what further and equal opportunity described, and it's a redundancy of underutilization. And so I just wanted to hear from anybody that could point me to why they're being used and if there's some definition I've missed somewhere.
If
I can expect them. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna make the observation on that on number 3. I think that the purpose was to be going above and beyond what is required when we do contracting, for example, in which underutilized is the technical term for, contracting issues and vendors. I think that if we read number 3, the whole item, the idea is to help businesses in a number of different ways, in addition to the contracting and vendor requirements or initiatives that we have in place. And I think that's part of the discussions that we've been having of how to be more creative in using the council's resources and expertise and footprint, to put it that way, in order to go beyond what is required or what the technical requirements are as far as using of contracting with underutilized businesses. So, for example, we have an initiative that it's the council is, and I'm going to say this wrong, but maybe Cy can expand on this. It's an initiative, an idea that Council Member Chris Ferguson had of having some of the Met Council's investment money invested in minority-owned banks. So that has nothing to do with contracting, but it's just a way of thinking creatively of ways in which we can help those particular communities. So my only, and what I understand, Edward, what you're saying, that this is not the technical term, but I think what we're trying to do is go beyond that.
That's real clear. I get that. I understand.
Okay.
If, for example, the Met Council wasn't doing what it could under further and equal opportunity and making capital available through some means, like they're doing depositing with minority banks and encouraging folks that may need working capital to, patronize that bank for that purpose, that would be a way of addressing undercapitalization. So I get it. That makes sense. I just wasn't clear about that. I'm not opposed to the language. I just wanted to hear from folks about what underrepresented mean and undercapitalized. But that makes it clear that you want to just make sure that they're looking at all those ways of helping in addressing a race-conscious approach.
Yeah, and thanks, Edward, because some of the questions about terms and definitions that you're raising, I'm pretty sure that, or not pretty sure, most likely, or it's very likely that council members will raise because of this, exactly what you said. Folks might be familiar with underutilization as a technical term, but what we're trying to go is beyond that. So we want to make sure that we have an explanation for any terms of art that we might use. So thank you for pointing that out.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. Both Ashanti and Mohammed have their hands up.
Oh, okay. I cannot see. Ashanti?
Thank you, Chair, committee members. I was just going to comment on the underrepresentation, underutilization, undercapitalization. I think Edward really has it. I think you have it correct, Edward, but I would just comment that within the council and most indefinitely within OEO, we tend to not use underrepresented for the reasons that you expressed, and also because it more so puts the onus or responsibility on those communities who we're trying to impact and be intentional in making sure that they participate in the process. And also, I think you have it right with undercapitalization. I just can't speak to if it's what the committee desires in terms of how it's used here. And then also with underserved, We generally use that more so with communities, but also with businesses and individuals. Again, for those same reasons, because underrepresented representation is not the issue. It is the utilization of those businesses and how they're served and how those communities are served.
All right. I just want to clarify on a technical matter that now I have the sidebar with the folks raising their hands, so now I can see that, and my apologies for not having that ready before. So I see that Mohammed and Surinthia have their hands up. So let me give the floor to Mohammed and then to Surinthia. Mohammed?
Thank you, Chair. I think I fully agree with the Chair the way you have defined these terms. I only had one suggestion to maybe minimize confusion if this document goes to the full council. We should maybe include a brief description of what those terms mean based on from the equity lens that you just described. So your description was quite clear, and I think we can use those descriptions to kind of clarify for those people who might have issues with understanding what the terms mean. So I'll just say that I have the view that we should just include the description of the terms. That's just an opinion I had.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a good idea since, again, that's what it's been reflected in the conversation. Surinthia?
Thank you, Chair, EAC members. I just want to make a point of reference with regard to this document. So in this section, as well as the other sections of the document where you see the blue highlight, these are additions that were made today. As Arena was going through your last meeting minutes, we captured that you had suggested changes you wanted to see in your work plan that had not yet been added. So we added those today, and this comes from your language as EAC members and your discussion that you had about what you wanted to see included in this plan. So today is your opportunity to reword that, keep in or remove any of the language that you see fit. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think that the recommendations are just to have, if we're gonna keep those terms undercapitalized and underserved, have some definitions to it. Most definitely we can do that, or we can just remove that last part of the section where it says after Native American, after other groups, or after Native American. So just leave it more specific and taking out this whole language, again, just to avoid confusion. So that will be my two suggestions, either to add definitions or just strike those last few words so we avoid this confusion in the future. Nalima, any suggestions?
Okay, I would suggest adding the description of the definitions.
Okay.
I can live with that, but what would be your definition of other groups who are undercapitalized or underserved?
As far as the other groups, what I was thinking is new immigrants, and that might be a redundancy with people of color, but on the other hand, there might be immigrants that are not people of color, but that are new to the U.S. So again, that might be both undercapitalized or underserved. So that the other groups was intended to catch or to cover folks that are not people of color or Native American.
That raises another question, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to be difficult here because I really do get the intent. But it just, undercapitalization would tend to suggest that there was some quantification done to determine that undercapitalization exists within this other group's community. And quantification would also be suggested to determine if they were underserved or overserved or overcapitalized. And I don't want to be difficult here, but I just want us to be careful about raising a potential bias one way or the other. Underserved or overserved or undercapitalized or overcapitalized. But there is a definition that the Department of Labor uses for MBEs, and it's particularly when you're talking about race-conscious approaches. It basically defines who they are. It's Black or African American. It's all of the descriptives that census and budget and management use to describe that protected group community, and that also implies women inside of those groups, or women in gender specific inside of those groups as well. The only question, and I know our committee raised this about businesses owned by persons with disabilities, and maybe OEO can help us with that language, just cleaning that part up. But I do understand your intent is to just make sure that we're not leaving anybody out, that we're being as inclusive as we possibly can.
That's right. That's the intent. And I see that Leah has the hands up, and then Ashanti. So Leah, do you have a comment?
I believe that I've seen a definition of undercapitalized from some industry advocacy organizations, and so I'd be happy to do a little legwork to find that. And then also, Edward, one of the things I was thinking of is maybe our operations subcommittee could take this and make sure that the language is as clear as it needs to be to describe what we're saying, and also look at some of those definitions and then propose that back to the full EAC.
Okay. Mohammed, and you have your hands up. Hand up.
So
okay.
I think we need to separate two things. Definition of terms that are used to indicate either investment or lack of investment, like undercapitalization or underutilization, and also describing the people who we're talking about. So if we are talking about American and Native groups, other groups, whatever that we are trying to do, I think the terms undercapitalization is an existing term. If someone wants definition, I just looked up the definition using Google. It talks about, investment, lack of constructive investment. So as a general term for, I think, lack of general investment in businesses that are owned by people of color and other minority groups. So the definition do exist. It's just a matter of fine tuning. But I think the intent is using an equity lens, it's very hard to just develop a standard definition of who is a person of color or who is a minority, because it's not a monogamous group. So it's not just black and white or black and brown. There are many people who either don't classify themselves as brown or black, and there's still minority who own businesses who are underserved. So I think coming up with exhaustive definition, a small document like this one will not be, I think, visible. So we just need to be conscious of what our intent is, which is clearly represented in this document. Definitions are available. And I don't think the Department of Labor is a gold standard in terms of defining what definition to be used. And from an equity lens of view, nothing is exhaustive. Anything that you can come up, you can easily frame your definition, and that becomes what you are referring to your document. So I don't want us to get hung on exhaustive definition of terms without necessarily looking at the intent we are trying to solve in this juncture of and out.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Edward.
Well, I just I understand where Mohammed's coming from with that. I just wanted to point out that when we craft this, we can't put OEO in a position to do something that is not legally permissible, is kind of what I'm getting at. I understand our intent and defining what our intent is, maybe something that they can work with, being that we are a lay committee. But technically, they have to follow, Minnesota statute 16C. They have to follow 473. They have to follow Executive Order 11246. Those are the legal things that if somebody challenged anything that they're doing that they would view as not legally permissible, we're asking them to do something that's outside of the scope of what they're doing. I'm not trying to make a big deal out of this, and maybe we can take it back. And I know that our committee was looking at the whole issue of race consciousness, how that is the methodology for doing that, which it can be done by the Met Council based on the advisements of the Department of Labor as it relates to this. And I think that OEO understands that too. That much of it is good, but it says underutilized businesses. And then it talk about that underutilization based on race groups, and then they define what those race groups are. Native Americans, Black African American, Hispanic, Asian, and then in there is a gender-specific consciousness as well in there. Then you would have to go through, I think it's 503 to look at businesses owned by persons with disabilities. So I think we're there, and I understand where we're going with this, and maybe it's enough, Mr. Chair, to suggest what you have is to define what we mean by undercapitalized and underrepresented. And that could be just groups that they run across that don't have the working capital to basically do it. And then we have emerging business enterprises that are underserved. You may have just incorporated and are learning about procurement activity and defining those kind of things so that we're reaching into all parts of the community to give them opportunities. And other groups, like someone said, it's new immigrants, it's folks that have not historically been on the radar screen, that may not necessarily fashion themselves personally under one of those constructs that we live by or the Department of Labor's put out there, but, may see themselves as Cameroonian, and that's how they identify themselves, and not necessarily African American or Black. But we recognize that in the community, that national identity weighs more than what is on the books here. So we're saying take a look at this because people may not necessarily identify themselves by African American, even though that's how we would want them to, but they are still they are have their national identity is what they live by. I get where you're coming from. Maybe we move with defining that so that it's more prescriptive in terms of the charge that we want OEO to explore. So I can live with amending my motion to say that we will provide a definition for other groups, and then what we mean by undercapitalized and underrepresented. And I'd be a part of any group, or we can go back into our subcommittee and write those definitions for you.
Excellent. Just to let me make sure nobody else has their hands up. Okay, just a couple of observations. Edward, your point about the other groups and how we define it's well taken. However, my only, I want to say concern, but the only point that I would like to make is like you said, that folks identify themselves in many different ways. And I don't know if we can have a comprehensive list. So unless we can capture every single possible category, which we can't, then the alternative is just leave it more general as other groups. And then we define, other groups is everybody else, 100% of the population. But our interest is those other groups that are struggling somehow. So I think that the specific definition should be on the barriers, again, the underserved and undercapitalized aspect of this, and as opposed to trying to define the groups, because, Minneapolis public schools have officially 22 different protected classes. So I don't think we can put all of those in. There's just too many, and then we'll be missing some. So that will be my only observation. But I do agree that we need to work on the definition of the two terms. And I think that I like Leah's suggestion, and like you said, Edward, of having the subcommittee wordsmith this a little bit and come with some definitions for undercapitalized or underserved or other terms that capture what we're trying to do. Again, and this is my shorthand is groups that are struggling economically because of who they are. And that will be the charge for the subcommittee to come up with a specific definition. So that would be my suggestion.
I will accept that as a friendly amendment to my motion.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I do have one last question, maybe.
And my amendments are always friendly. Go ahead.
Just have one last question in terms of terms. Not trying to be difficult, but want us all to understand. Under that same one, number 4, the bullet point, and I'm just saying it for the first time tonight, so it reads priority of contracting goes to protected groups within the job category. Is that term jobs, should that be the purchasing category? Or is it okay, and I'm asking OEO, that the term is used job category?
This was somebody else's comment that was added, so I'm not sure. I'll defer to Sai or whomever made the comment to address that.
Mr. Chair, EAC members, I see that Ashanti also has his hand up, so I'll let him be responsive. But I don't have a record of which of the committee members would have made that change, unless it is a suggestion that we made in the update that we promised we would do for you. So I'll turn that over to Ashanti.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, my comment is really more of a question, and tend to kind of coincide with committee member Sheikh. I guess I'd ask what was the intent. I can guess that we're talking about either scope of work here, maybe, since we're talking about contracted rather than job category. But again, without knowing the intent of the individual who put this, it is a yes. But assuming that my guess is right, in that sense we're talking about contracting, then I would propose that scope of work replace that word, because we are kind of mixing two things here, workforce and contract.
Okay. That makes sense. Job category, Mr. Chair, it tends to be under, like affirmative action, hiring, employment, and job categories. Scope of work or purchasing category would be more contract related. So if nobody have a problem with that, I would also just ask that we amend that to say within the scope of work, as suggested by Sante.
Yeah, and I see that Irina just updated the language on the presentation in our screen, so that's what it reads now, the scope of work. Any other changes, comments, suggestions at this time? And just to recap, so where we are at this point is there's a motion to approve the priority areas with the clarification that the subcommittee, is it operations? Yeah. It's going to come up with a definition for undercapitalized and underserved to be added later, but because those are kind of wordsmithing or technical definitions, I think we can still go ahead and vote on this as it is, again, with the later clarifications of the definitions of the terms that we're using. So that's what I think we are at this point. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we do have the motion with the amendment as described. Do we have a second?
Second by Charlie.
Second by Lee. Okay. And Irina, do we need to call a roll call for this?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So just go ahead. Thank you.
Lenice Block. Andreas Boland. Desrelyn Cole. Leah Goldstein Moses.
Yes.
Francisco Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Nicholas Jenkins.
Aye.
Chai Lee.
Aye.
Michael Luceni. Edward McDonald.
Yes.
Julia Miller. T. Way. Richard Paul. Sarah Rudolph.
Aye.
Mohammed Sheikh.
Aye.
Nalima Sitate Munene. Philip Sterner. Anita Irvina Davis.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Um, just to clarify, when can we expect to have the definitions? And I mean, I'm just, do you think you can discuss this at the next subcommittee meeting?
Yes, I'm available. I'm pretty free this week if Leah and Anita and Julie want to pull something together this week. We can get it done for you right away.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Moving on, the other kind of related item to the workflow was to the priorities, excuse me, was the workflow model that Leah had developed and that was also sent with the documents for today. And again, to recap, this is our recommended process to bring the input from the EAC to the Met Council and to staff. So folks that were here last year, were part of the EAC, might remember that we've been discussing this issue of how to bring our input uh, to staff and to the council, and also how to get their feedback and have that conversation process, because we didn't have a specific steps that we needed to follow. So it was more haphazard and ad hoc in that way. So in any case, so what we're doing is having a simplified process to bring our input to staff and to the council for review and hopefully adoption. And we were discussing that this was discussed at the last meeting or perhaps the one before that. Uh, and we had your input, but I'm just open it up, excuse me, for any comments as to the workflow. And also, Leah, feel free to chime in if you have any points or clarifications that you would like to make, since you took the initiative of drafting this. But again, this is our recommended process, and doesn't mean that the regional administrator and the chair will adopt it as it is, but at least this will be our starting point to have that conversation. So I'm just going to open the floor for comments and or suggestions at this time. Don't be shy.
Sure, Gonzalo, if I
Yeah.
may. So I think this is a document that we've had a lot of discussion about in the past meetings. It's definitely an opportunity to clean it up, if I may, if there are any other suggestions. But also, if it's my memory serves right, I think the committee had adopted this is a process for us to use. But I mean, there's always an opportunity for folks to give more input as we continue to refine it, and so we're open to that.
I apologize. Yeah, we had discussed it before, that you had mentioned it before that this was already approved. Kind of forgot about that. So I don't think we need a vote on submitting this for consideration. Um, yeah, it's just we'll definitely submit this with um, the priorities that we just finished discussing. So it will be these two documents that will be provided for, part of what we want to accomplish. So um, unless there's any comments, then we can just move on to the next step. Since again, this was already voted on and approved at a previous meeting. I just forgot that about that. Okay. Hearing none, so we move to the next item on the agenda. So, oh yeah, it's next. Please welcome Cerinthia Jordan, the Director of the Office of Equal Opportunity, and she will give us some updates on EAC and OEO coordination and collaboration. So, Sai.
Thank you, Chair, committee members. I just wanted to take a few minutes on your agenda and give you some highlights of what is taking place at the council. That's one of the things that we have indicated we're committed to doing, is taking a look at those standing committee agendas that are coming out and being able to highlight some information for you. We'll be doing that particularly as we move forward with some of your subcommittees, as we get some clarity on what your top tasks and items will be based on your priorities. A couple of things that are coming up are work plans for the standing committee. So just as the EAC is going through your work planning process for 2021, the standing committees are also engaged in doing their work plans at the same time. So that would be management committee. They're going to be taking a look at their work plan. This month is anticipated at the end of January. I believe the date's January 27th, if I'm correct. MTS, Metropolitan Transportation Services, and Metro Transit will be presenting a work plan at the end of February for the Transportation Committee. The Environmental Services Committee has already engaged in their work planning process, and we had a review of a draft that I believe we provided to you before, and so we're looking into whether or not that work plan is being finalized, and then we'll get a follow-up on the Community Development Committee work plan as well. There have been some requests that we are going to be supporting the subcommittee of the Transportation Subcommittee on, so we have a commitment to follow up with you and get that information to you. And then we wanted to give you some other highlights. We're involved now in the 2050 regional planning process. Ashanti will be able to give you some updates on what's happening with those next meetings. I believe they're going to take a review of that tomorrow, so I want to give him the opportunity to talk to you about that as well. And then the Citizens League, we have engaged with them to do a review of the Metro Transit Police Department. They have asked for an EAC advisory committee member, and Anita has agreed to serve on that committee. So thank you for that agreement to be of service and give input to the committee from the EAC, and also bring information back to the EAC as well. Those are a couple of the highlights that I have for you today. And Ashanti, did you want to add any information about the planning process? Or the 2050 intention plan?
Is that they are in the process of putting together their outreach and engagement plan, and they're looking for feedback in and around that. It has not been finalized, but they do have a draft. And I think the first sharing and input gathering, they're starting with council members at the COW tomorrow. So I would just say, if you're interested in hearing kind of the first draft of that and how that's going, to listen into the COW if you're available tomorrow at 4.
Excellent. Anything else, Sai or Ashanti?
Thank you for that. Those are the highlights that I have for today's meeting.
Any questions from the members or comments for either Ashanti or Cerinthia?
Yes, I do have a question about the 2050 plan, Ashanti. Do you have a sense of what is the timeline for that process?
What I can tell you is that they're still in the early stages, so still within the first quarter of, of, of really looking at and developing. Like I said, they haven't even finalized the outreach and engagement plan as of yet. So I so to be more direct, no, I can't give you a real specific idea of what the timeline is. Oh, I forgot. Michelle is on, and yes, she's saying yes. We're just getting started. Yes, it's a long plan, but she's on. So if she wants to speak to that, please, I would invite Michelle and defer to her.
Mr. Chair and members, this is Michelle Fury. I work in the communications department here at the council, and I'm helping, along with several other staff, manage some of the initial phases of creating our engagement plans and processes. The regional planning process is long. We just completed the local comprehensive planning aspects of the regional planning process, and we're awaiting results from the 2020 census, which is usually the kickoff point to the regional plan. So at this point, we're really just beginning the process of making sure that all the right people are being engaged about what the engagement process might look like. So it's very preliminary. As Ashanti mentioned, we're having our first conversation with council members tomorrow. So I would definitely encourage you to view that committee of the whole meeting at 4 o'clock if you're available. If you're not available, it will be recorded and you can view it later, just like any of our other council meetings. So I encourage you to do that as well, and I'd be happy to send out a link after the meeting is completed. But just to assure you, this is a very, very, very early stage, and we'll definitely be coming to this committee at your pleasure to have conversations about this. And if this is something that you feel is appropriate for a subcommittee, we'd be happy to work with them too. So it's very early. We're just beginning the process of starting to consult with constituencies and key folks who are connected to regional planning processes. So I just encourage you, if you have questions or anything that you're interested in right now, either send those messages through Ashanti and Sai, and always feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm happy to help make sure that you're part of the process.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, I think one thing I would like to offer, I'm not sure if it's Michelle, probably, since this is a long process, and if we're still in the very beginning stages, perhaps what the committee could benefit from is, I know the council creates all these regional plans. I think Thrive MSP 2040, I think we could argue, has been one of the plans that, probably council, maybe for the first time and for the longest time in forever, had a robust community engagement. But I think just as with anything, just like with other plans, and I think a lot of what has plagued the committee time and again is perhaps having some clear direction or idea about what we should be looking for. So for example, we have Thrive MSP 2040. I know there are times we try to tap into that plan that was created and, it was not fruitful. We were told we can't do this and that, even though it was in the plan. So I think it's not just about engaging the committee. I think being very clear and actually honest to some extent about what is the, giving the committee a very clear understanding of what is this plan about, where did Thrive MSP 2040 get us, if, in terms of the plan, so that I think what I'm trying to get to is, I think we would like some really clear insight and direction about how we can engage meaningfully, in Thrive MSP 2050, and also I don't know if the council does an assessment of what does the council think they achieved, in Thrive MSP 2040.
Mr. Chair, members, I think if that question is directed at me. I think that is exactly the process we're beginning with the council right now, is to be thinking big picture about what Thrive MSP 2040 accomplished, what we did well, where we could improve, and just some big picture possibilities that maybe help frame up what the next regional plan can either address or begin to provide insight into. So I would encourage the same conversation here, and I'd be happy to share the material that we're presenting tomorrow, which is just some basics and a handful of questions. And I'd even be happy to come to this committee and do exactly the same thing we're doing with the council at some point in the future, the near future. So if that's sort of the frame that you'd like to begin the conversation in, I think, Nalima, you laid it out very effectively, and we'd be happy to construct something that works for you so that we can hear from this committee, but also start to shape the engagement in a constructive way.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Yes, that was exactly my drift. Yeah.
Cool.
And just to follow up briefly, I think I mentioned this before. There are many, if not all, of the council members are very interested in moving forward with equity issues as broadly defined regarding all the work that the Met Council is doing. So we will be definitely discussing issues of equity as the new Thrive 2050 plan is being developed. That's going to be front and center. So we will have many opportunities to provide input and not only from the EAC as a committee, but if individuals have their own suggestions on other things and ideas, I personally would be more than happy to bring forth any specific suggestions or observations that you might have on an individual basis too, or on behalf of any organizations that you might be involved with. So we are very interested in addressing all issues related to equity for reasons that are obvious, but also there's a lot of interest from many of the members in doing so. So I think this is a good time to bring the EAC into the mix, because our advice most definitely will be listened to at this time. So
yeah, and I just have a quick follow-up question, Michelle. I mean, as I'm curious to know, in terms of this evaluation, assessment, etc., about what Thrive MSP has accomplished, does the council do a self-assessment on themselves? Is it the council evaluating itself and saying, hey, this is what, we accomplished?
Chairs and committee, I don't know if I would exactly call it a self-assessment or self-evaluation, but what did happen was a pretty broad and extensive review of where the plan could have been more in line with some of the principles that are in the plan. So, for example, making sure that different groups across the council were providing the best coordinated policy development, the best coordinated implementation, where there may have been some roadblocks to progress because it wasn't either explicit enough in the plan, or there were aspects that could have been a little bit more measurable, maybe. So it's not so much a did we do it or didn't we do it, but how can we improve on what this plan laid out and brought forward. And to your point earlier, you're right that this was a quite an unusual process for the regional plan and creating it. It was much more intentional engagement. There's a lot more voices in it. And that's another piece that we want to make sure that the voices that are part of this plan not only continue forward, but that we broaden it still further, right? So, so there has been some assessment in terms of where there maybe were opportunities for improvement. And one of the things that we've asked the council members is that very question. None of them were actually part of creating this plan. So that's one thing that is, so it's a little bit difficult to ask this council to evaluate a previous. That being said, there are aspects of the regional plan that could have been different, and the wisdom and knowledge that we have from the current council is going to be brought to bear on that. So I think sort of is the answer to your question, but probably not quite the way you're suggesting. And I'd be interested to know if there's a way we can maybe work through some of those ideas in the time that we have before a plan is actually created and brought forward for others to evaluate and approve. So I think there's still an opportunity to do something a little bit more like an evaluation of what you're talking about or of the type that you're talking about. But you know, as of right now, that's either still in the beginning stages or not quite what I would say has been going on. But there has been some pretty extensive evaluation of how the last plan came together and what opportunities may have been missed in that process.
So, yes, I mean, my first instinct would be to say that, you know, as I mentioned, a lot of labor was put into participating in Thrive MSP 2040, and I think communities spent their own time and resources and put in all their hopes, dreams, and aspirations on Thrive MSP 2040. I mean, I can't volunteer community to say you should go back to them. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to volunteer folks and say that, hey, people would be willing, especially in the midst of COVID and a pandemic. But I mean, I was just curious about how that evaluation is being done. I mean, especially if we think about where we were in Thrive before or during the creation of Thrive MSP 2040, I guess apart from the technicalities about we could have been more specific about these numbers and stuff like that in terms of all this, in terms of the plan has to have an intent. I think for me, the big question is, are we better off?
Right.
Because, you know, because of Thrive MSP 2040, have we made any gains? I mean, we could have done a lot of activities, we could have a lot of numbers, but I think equity was prominent, and this idea of we have this massive number of people who are being left behind in our region. Are those people still being left behind? Are they better off? Especially the folks, especially the enfranchised folks. Like, are we better off? Is the big question, you know, before we even begin to delve into another plan.
Yeah.
Because I think it's the impact and not so much just the technicalities of did we get numbers and etc. But you know, if the intent was to advance equity in the region, are we better off as a region, and are we heading in the right direction?
Madam Chair, Edward, your comments make a lot of sense. I mean, I'm hard pressed to find how you can write another plan without one doing some assessment of the impact of the previous plan. That would be my first question is, what is the foundation we're building off of? And without discerning that, we could be just sitting here spinning in mud. So what you're requesting makes a lot of sense to me, particularly around the question of equity. You know, we kind of know where it was and what the intent was with the plan. So where do we move? Where do we move the markers? And how do we then capture that, sustain it, retain it, and then grow a little bit further based on what we learned could have been done better, or what efforts could have been put in to achieve a greater degree of accomplishment in those areas. So that does make a lot of sense. So what you're suggesting, I'd be hard pressed to see anybody writing a plan without first doing that.
Chairs and members, if I may, I didn't want to suggest that there has been no evaluation of the success of the previous regional plan. My comments were merely to say that I made an assumption, which was probably not my finest move, that that Chair Nalima was suggesting a type of evaluation that I'm not sure has been done. I am also not the technical staff that would be doing such an evaluation. But my involvement with the plan does give me enough information to know that there is some evaluation going on. There will be more evaluation as part of the creation process. Really just wanted to assure you that if these are things that you would like to see in the process to create the plan, that this is absolutely the time to start talking about those things, and we can for sure work them into the process. So there's plenty of time to include all of this conversation, make sure that we're getting the right people to the table, and make sure that there are outcomes with this planning process that identify the things that you're suggesting, and that should be very clearly communicated through a plan like this. It is for sure going to be one of the bigger efforts that the council undergoes here in the next 3-ish years. So just get ready, because it's coming, and we're looking forward to working with you and trying to figure out what it should convey and how it should be measured in the future. So it's a good time, and like I said before, I'd be happy to at any future meeting make sure that the conversation that we're starting with at the council can at least come here, and then you can help shape what it looks like and where it goes from there.
Madam Chair, this is such an important conversation. Thank you for honing in on that pre-evaluation. When you consider the federal government's about to dump $2 trillion into the marketplace, and Minnesota will definitely get its fair share of that, and a significant amount of those dollars, our dollars, will roll through the Metropolitan Council. To not have a foundational plan that take a look at existing equity efforts, what was accomplished, and then building off of those to have greater impact, it would be criminal to communities that have had to endure COVID-19, a history of poor administrative application of equal access opportunity laws, and a lot of that information is already there. The Keenan Research Group disparity study, I mean, a host of things that are out there, Itasca project, a lot of different things are out there. And because the Met Council was even established so that there was an equitable distribution of those revenues that come into the metropolitan area, you know, it's such an important discussion. It's an important plan. If it's not done right, then we get back to business as usual, and it would be a tragedy, or it would be horrible to not think that what you're suggesting shouldn't be done, and building off of that to make sure that we have a greater impact. So I hope Michelle understands that, and a lot of people, you know, across all communities are looking at how this economy will be built going forward. And the last thing any of us want is it to be business as usual, leading to where we are right now. And in fact, it has to take on greater importance going forward. So just keep that in mind. What we do from assessing things, analyzing things, and then planning from that foundation is hugely critical, so that we just don't slip back into business as usual. Even though I know there are a lot of people on the inside that would just like to keep things business as usual.
So, thank you, Edward. So, Michelle, thank you so much for your last comment. I think it clarifies things more, and it draws a clear distinction for me too, that is what the very beginning process means, that it's the beginning of all these discussions and not just, okay, we're going to start writing this plan as it assumed. So hopefully there's still opportunities to insert these ideas. So thank you for that clarification, Michelle.
You're welcome, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, both Ashanti and Sarah have their hands up. Thank you.
Sarah?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have two comments. The first is very brief and just respectfully, as a matter of order, I'm just going to suggest that members of the committee wait to be called upon by one of the co-chairs to speak. And then my other comment was really going back to the idea, I know at several meetings we talked about developing our own definition of equity. And I was thinking about Michelle's comments about the plan, and I just feel like equity means so many things, and I think we all share a sense of what that is, and that's why we're all here. But nevertheless, I think if the EAC had kind of a working definition of what that really meant, or at least some outcomes that we were striving towards, that would be easier to advance in a plan such as the 2050 plan, and even perhaps in our own subcommittee work, that we could kind of align with what that really means so that we have something to measure against.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Shanti, you had a comment too?
Thank you, chairs, committee members. Yes, I was just going to make the point that there are some measures in the Pride 2040 plan around some of the things that this committee has deemed as priority areas, like affordable housing. There are measures and reports. So I think I like the co-chair's suggestion of making sure we understand what goes into a plan, what measures should be in there, or what measures the committee thinks, and what measures were included in the Pride 2040 that we can substantively look at and measure progress. Thank you.
Any other comments? Sai, I see your hands up.
Just want to add something in addition, as we're talking about the first meeting being held tomorrow night at the Council of the Whole meeting, also online. And if the full group is interested, we could certainly send that document to you. But the presentation for tomorrow's session is already available online as a link within the agenda. And then also you'd have the opportunity to hear, if not tomorrow, at a recorded meeting of what the plan is moving forward for the for 2050. Thank you.
Sarah, I see your hand still up. Do you have any comments?
I just haven't removed it yet. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Oops. And moving forward with the agenda, I think I'm just gonna open it for the members. Any last comments about any issues, new or things on your mind? Any updates from your organizations? Anything that you would like to share with us? We're getting at the end of the agenda for today. So since we have some time, just like to open it up in case folks want to make any mentions or updates or anything else that is on your mind. Let me check here. Mohammed, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to give you guys an update on what we have been doing as Hennepin County in conjunction with Met Council, Metro HRA. So we've been working with Metro HRA to get homeless individuals who have experienced chronic homelessness and who have had issues with mental health and substance use and who have not been housed for a long time to get vouchers for them, Section 8 vouchers. I think from the beginning of this year, around March to November, alongside with Metropolitan and Municipal Public Housing, we were able to provide about 150 individuals permanent housing with vouchers. In addition to that, also we were able to provide what's called permanent housing with supportive services. So as we think about affordable housing, although what we got was vouchers for people with disabilities, basically either mental health, substance use, physical health, and other disabilities. So we were able to get those vouchers. We didn't get the actual mainstream vouchers for non-disabled individuals. As we think, I think about affordable housing, I think that model worked quite well, specifically for people who have experienced chronic homelessness because of other issues, and we were able to kind of bridge barriers, including history of criminal justice, involvement with criminal justice that has become a barrier for people to obtain housing or vouchers. At least my experience is it works when we have a focused and well-intended objective that involves both collaboration with the council and community organizations. So as we focus, I think, on affordable housing, we should be able to work with the council to be able to get something similar in the pipeline so that at least we can work with organizations that are serving people who have either experienced homelessness or people who are unable to afford housing because of income. So I think this is just a kind of a floating idea, nothing in particular that I have laid out, but I'm just talking about my experience with what we have had since March this year. And it worked, and I've been thinking about it. If we, and the council, I must say, Metro HRA was able to provide and work with us consistently by even bridging gaps where landlords were asking full deposits, like maybe money that, and with application fees as well as damage deposit, they were able to pay where we were not able to. As we think about affordable housing, I think there is a working model, but I wanted it to be expanded beyond people with disabilities and chronic homelessness to even other community members who have had issues with paying rent because of housing becoming quite unaffordable. This is just my 2 cents. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Any other updates or comments? No? Okay. So I do have an announcement before we adjourn. So just to remind you that the standing committee is continuing to meet virtually via WebEx, and our next standing committee meeting is Tuesday, January 26, from 5:30 to 6:30. And again, just to remind you that your participation in the standing committee meetings is crucial, because that's where we discuss the agenda items and all the things that we would like the members to submit before the membership. So I invite you all to participate at the standing committee meetings. And again, the next one is on Tuesday, January 26th from 5:30 through 6:30 p.m. Okay. I don't have anything else. Nalima, anything else that you would like to add?
No, nothing more.
Okay. Any other comments, last parting thoughts from the members? No? Okay. Thank you very much for a good meeting today. I think we are moving in the right direction, and hope you have a great rest of your evening. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.